Hi there, I'm Karen Dunn of KMD Productions. From the equipment manufacturers to the engineers to the business people behind the scenes. Over the years, every member of the Pro Audio Corner of the music industry have become family to me, and it's my job to bring the whole eclectic crew together. Each episode, I'll introduce you to one of these characters and open a window into my world of creating community in pro audio. Thanks for tuning in to One and Dunn. Hi, today we're welcoming audio engineer Alexandria Perryman. Hi, Alex. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. So I first found out about you through Sound Girls. I do a weekly e-blast with programs that are available for people, and Sound Girls had sent me the information about you. And and you were working with NASA at the time, so that was pretty cool. And we all started talking about you, so we figured you'd be a good person to have on the podcast. What I wanted to do was start with your background, but I've been thinking about this all day today. I've been thinking about goal setting. I listened to one of your podcasts, and you were talking about how when you first went to school, you had your life planned. You had each step done, but nothing worked out the way you had planned, and you started setting shorter goals. So you went to school at Full Sail. When you first started, what did you want to do? What was your initial goal?
My initial goal when I went to Full Sail was to basically mix my favorite artists. Like, I wanted to be the person that either is a recording engineer or a mixing engineer. I wasn't too into mastering at the time, but I really wanted to mix the records that I heard on the radio, or I wanted to record the records, be in the studio with the artists and enjoying that moment. That's what I really wanted to do when I first got there.
So you found out, and it seems I've found this with most people I talk to for this podcast, is nobody has a straight line to what they actually end up doing. And it sounds like you kind of learned that then when you were in school, that maybe it wasn't exactly how. It's nice to be able to plan things, but when they don't happen. So how are you able to change that whole system? Like, I always set goals. I'm a goal setter. I like to, and it's goals for me, and I like to achieve things, and it's not, I want to achieve it, not someone else. It's just, I want to challenge myself all the time.
Right.
So how did you change your mindset so that you could do smaller goals before, and not have the one big long goal?
I think what it is that I had to realize what my personality type was. I'm a very analytical person. I like goals. And then on top of that, I'm competitive. In return, even more competitive with myself. So if I set a goal for 5 years, I want to get it done in half the time. Uh-huh. And when I realized that I was not hitting these goals, I hadn't even reached to the point of where the goal was supposed to be at, but because of the fact that I didn't do it in half the time, I'm beating myself up. I'm making myself miserable. So I was like, let me set a shorter goal, and then maybe that way I'll hit it faster, and then I'll feel better, because I keep having this competition. Rather than trying to fix the competitiveness of myself, I was like, let me just adjust something else. And so that's really my whole reasoning behind it. It was it wasn't so much that I wasn't hitting my goals. It's I wasn't giving myself time to do it, and I was constantly frustrated. So I was like, let me just change the time frame of it and make smaller goals that will all lead to this bigger goals. So have sub goal categories, and then I found myself hitting those pretty much every day, and it was great. And it made knocking out those bigger goals happen a lot faster.
Uh-huh. And were there things when you reached that goal you realized that, oh, here I am, but this isn't really what I'm interested, or this isn't what I thought it would be? And then,
oh yeah.
So how do you change course? Because, and I did want to talk about this later, because I'm really fascinated with change, and so many people are afraid of change. They know where they're going and they have that certain path, and something happens, they're afraid to take that leap or change direction. So how do you deal with something like that?
I think the most important thing, because I'm not a big fan of changing things, especially not being the analytical person I am who writes down to everything. But I had to really be honest with myself and am I happy? Am I enjoying this? And I've realized, because I've changed courses quite a few times, even though I'm not really that far along in my career yet. I've changed courses quite a few times, but each one of those times I was completely a nervous wreck right before I did it. But I immediately felt better once I actually no, I'm switching. But I had to be honest with myself. And I think that was the most important part. I was like, look, I know what you wrote down on paper. This is what you want to do. But at the end of the day, this is literally your life. You're allowed to change if you're not happy. Or if this is, you finally reached it and that's not what you want to do anymore, it's okay. You can go and do something that makes you happy now. Because at that time you said it, that's what would make you happy. You got there, realized it's not exactly what you wanted, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you get on this path to start with? Is your family musical? Were you immersed in it as a child? How did this happen?
I think I think that does have a big background into it. I mean, I come from a family full of everyone can sing except for me. I kind of feel like I like to joke around and say that, if I had the capability to sing, then it would just be terrible for this earth, because you can't have like all these other qualities and can sing. So I had to have something going against me. And I was completely fine, after a while, because like my sisters can sing, my mom can sing, my grandmother was in a singing group, my nephew's in honor choir right now. So my family's full of singers. But music has always been a big part of my family. Music and sports. Everyone did something in music, whether they were singing or playing an instrument. For me, it was playing instruments. And so that's how I really got that creativity through it. But yeah, singing and music was a big part of my childhood.
And what about sports? Did you get into anything?
Yes. So everyone in my household has played some type of sport. And I didn't even really realize that until like I broke it down and said, wow, we all are like a huge sports family. Like my mom was legitimately a soccer mom, because I played soccer from like age 5 to 13. My two older sisters both played softball. I played soccer. One of my sisters played volleyball. My nephew was into boxing. Then he played golf. My niece, she did track. My dad he played basketball all the way through college. My mom was a basketball coach. So like sports was just huge.
Yeah, no, I played competitive volleyball. I played other sports too, but competitive sports from 5th grade through college. And I think a lot of what I learned being on a team and competing, it has shaped the way I approach everything, work life, family life. So do you think that sports and band actually have helped you with your path and that competition element that you feel with yourself?
Yeah, I think so. One, outside of being just competitive by nature and having a competitive family. But on top of that, just having someone on your same team that's having to depend on you to do your job is what pushed me to do it. And I literally look at my work that same way, whether I'm working on, editing or mixing for a video or a movie or something like that. All these other folks are depending on me to get this mix correct. So I need to do my job so that way they can do their job, and so that we can have one successful project. And so in my head, I literally break it down to like sports themes all the time. I use sports analogies all the time when I'm explaining stuff, either sports or food. And so, it's helped me a lot. Just that whole team aspect, that whole people are depending on you to do this. So it kind of pushes me to go above what I normally would go on my own if no one's depending on me. It gives me that extra boost.
Yeah. I use the Warriors as my example all the time. I always talk about not everybody can be Steph Curry.
Right.
So, when you decided to go to Full Sail, were your parents on board? Was that like totally a good thing to do?
Yeah. So here's the thing. My family, I come from, education is everything. Basically, and my dad, before he passed away in 2011, he had this rule in our household, which is so funny. He's like, you either get a job in a trade, like in your apprentice underneath someone, you go to college, or you go to the military. That's it. You're not just sitting around here. And so my mom was a school teacher. She was a lot more lenient. She understands children a little bit better than my ex-military dad. But my mom was completely on board with it because, I never disliked school, but being in school, like I did beyond pre-K, like I was in school, Head Start and all those things. So being in school my entire life, I kind of was done with it, honestly. But my mom was like, so what do you want to do? And I told her that I wanted to do stuff in music. She's like, well, do you know anybody that can teach you how to do this? And I was like, no. She's like, well, then I guess you got to go to school. Because if you want to do this, you got to know how to do it. You got to have someone teach you how to do it, and you don't have anyone around you. And so that's kind of what drove me to going to school. And my mom was like all behind it. I mean, she was like, all right, this is what you want to do. We're all in. Let's go do it.
Oh, it's
But
so
it was
cool.
one of those things where I couldn't stop. You know, I had to finish.
Yeah. Now, were there artists that you listened to when you were growing up that inspired you to want to go in and be an engineer?
Oh, yes. Missy Elliott. Like, I don't fangirl over anybody, but I promise you, if I ever met Missy Elliott, I probably would cry. She sent me a tweet 2 years ago on my birthday saying happy birthday. And like, I broke down in tears for like 30 minutes and no one in my family knew what was wrong with me. I was like, I don't get starstruck over people, but like, she tweeted me. So I realized if that's how I acted behind a tweet, if I ever met her in a professional setting, I don't know if I could be professional. I might just cry.
Now, what was it about her sound, or was it her lyrics? What was it about her that you like so much?
I think what it was is that she was just so unapologetically herself, you know? Like, she was free to express herself. She wore clothes that she felt like wearing. She didn't care what other people were wearing. She wore stuff that made her happy. She danced and rapped and sung about stuff that she liked, that she enjoyed. And I just liked her freedom in all of it. I think that's what it was, her freedom to express herself. And that's, you know, even now, like, just seeing how positive and uplifting she is towards other younger artists and just anybody, her interactions that you see in her interviews, she just seems like the coolest person in the world. And I always got that from like watching her as a kid. I was like, man, I just want to be Missy Elliott. Like, you see how cool she is? Everyone loves her. This is why.
Yeah. So you graduated from Full Sail and you started working in a studio. Now, I was fascinated to find out that you didn't like studio life. I thought everybody who gets in a studio loves it. So
I thought I would too.
So
it shocked me.
Well, how'd you figure out that? I mean, what was it about it that you didn't like, and how did you decide that you were going to make a career move?
It was so slow. It was one of those things where it's like, I could tell I was forcing myself trying to like it because this is something that I said I always wanted to do. And my mom was just like, I would come home after a day doing sessions. It wasn't that I didn't have enough work. It was that I just was bored with the work. And I mean, we had artists coming in there, different types of artists. I was like, man, another take. Great. Awesome. And I was just so bored with it. I was like, man, I'm ready to do something else. I didn't get a rush out of it. And that's when I realized, I was like, wow, maybe I really am some sort of like a thrill junkie, or like, I think that's that sports background. Yep. And I didn't realize how much that affected me until I got into the studio. I was like, man, this is boring. Like, I'm bored, and I would love this stuff. Like, I would go to the studio with my friend who was an artist when we were in high school, and I would have so much fun hanging out in the studio with him. But then when I had to do it for a living, and even throughout college, I loved our laps that we had in the studio, but it wasn't an all-day thing. It wasn't a full-time thing. And when it became full-time thing, I realized I was not having fun. It wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy being there. Yeah, I got to play with cool gear and hear music before everyone else did, but it wasn't anything to excite me. I had finally got there, and I just was like, no, I need something more.
Okay, but then you went from that to doing AV in hotels. Was that really that much more exciting?
No, it wasn't. But at least I was moving. I think that's what, because it's funny. I didn't enjoy the AV work in hotels either. But the thing that I did enjoy about it is that at least I'm going to a different hotel every day. And I'm going to all these different places, and I'm moving around, and I'm seeing, you know, I'm moving and I'm doing stuff. But I missed the part of actually hands on the gear mixing. I didn't get to do that. So that wasn't fun about it. I was doing the more physical labor of setting up projector screens and all of that jazz. And so while I got the excitedness of moving around and going to different places, I lost the creative side.
Right. So how do you find both, right? So NASA, is that both?
NASA was both. NASA definitely was both.
There was
a lot of moving around.
Yeah. So how did that come around?
It was one of those things where I was filling out a bunch of applications at 2:00 in the morning, just anything that looked remotely. It got to the point where I stopped reading so much what the description was of the job, and I was just applying because I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of these hotels. I'm dying. And so I just started applying for multiple jobs. And the funny thing about it is that the application actually didn't say NASA on it. All I think I remember that it said was that they were looking for an audio engineer. And I was like, cool, I'll sign up. Sign me up. And I just filled out. And I did that back in like June of 2016. I didn't get a call for an interview until October. And so I had completely forgot. And on top of that, I didn't know that it was for NASA at the time. I just thought it was for whatever this company was.
Do you think you would have applied if you knew it was for NASA?
Probably not. I probably would have been freaked out. Even though NASA was a childhood dream of mine, because like before I got really off into music, when I was in elementary school, I was such a science nerd. And I still kind of am, but like it was like blatant science fair every other week. Sign me up. And so I was like, I want to work at NASA. I want to be an engineer at NASA. And that was my whole thing. But I was so far at this time away from that whole science side of my life to where I've been totally freaked out. And I'd be like, are you sure this is the right kind of engineer? And that's what I said at the interview. I was like, are you sure? Like, this is like, I'm not that, type of engineer. I'm not like a, electrical engineer. Like, I don't know that stuff. And they're like, oh, no. This is the right place. I was like, okay, because I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here.
Yeah. So I would have been freaked out. I don't know what I would have done once I found out. I don't know how I'd get through the interview.
My mom had to talk me off the ledge. She drove me to my interview, and I was in the car. I was like, you know what, Mom? I think we should just turn around. Now that I think about it, I think this is a terrible idea. And she was like, we just drove 60 miles away from where we live for you to go do this interview. You're going to go do this interview. Like, you're going to go do it. I was like, great.
Moms are good that way. So you ultimately, they offered it to you and you took the job, right? So how did you know that it was a right fit? Or did you just go in thinking, wow, this is cool, I'll try it out for a while?
Oh, I had imposter syndrome like from day one. It was actually funny. One day we're having a cleaning day. So my first day at NASA, I was spent moving boxes and cleaning out the studio. And they promised me that that's not what my job would actually be. It just so happened I started on their clean day. And I was like, okay, great, because I left the job where I was moving boxes. I really didn't want to do that here. But I had imposter syndrome like all the time, because I would sit down in these ready, to launch meetings that they would have with astronauts to go over their public side things like, hey, we're going to talk about all the different education events you're doing, all the media events. We're going to talk about all that. And so I'm sitting there in front of these astronauts, and apparently I'm the representative for the audio side of things. And they're looking to me to answer these questions. And I was like, I mean, like, I know these questions, but it's kind of like, why don't you know the answers? Like, you're the astronaut. But NASA is very intent on, this is your job. We want you to do your job because this is our job. And so everyone plays their part. And you need all of these parts to move in order for this thing to work. And that includes the public side, the PAO, Public Affairs Office side, and learning how to hook up a microphone. There's countless of astronauts where I had to teach about the on-off switch on a handheld microphone. And it was just blew my mind that some of them would get up there in space and forget how to use a microphone. It was wild.
Because they're astronauts, right?
Yeah. I was like, guys, it's not rocket science. Like, you already did the hard stuff. Like, this is easy.
So what was it about the job that you liked the most?
I liked the challenge of it. I definitely liked the rush of it, especially because 90% of the stuff that I did was live. So I like the rush of doing stuff for live television and knowing, like, looking over at the Facebook Live that we're doing and seeing that there's 1.2 million people listening to what we're doing. I'm like, oh, okay, I better not screw up this next transition. So I liked that. I really enjoyed, like, how I liked seeing, like, big time celebrities that would come visit NASA turn into, like, 7-year-olds. That was the funniest thing to me, like seeing, like, NFL players turn into a kid the moment they met an astronaut and, like, totally freak out. And it was always fun seeing that. And then, like, seeing the kids who got to ask an astronaut a question and knowing that I played a small part in that because I connected their Skype call together. And it was like, oh, man, this is so cool. Like, they're just like a little mini astronaut. And this might be their only chance they get to ever talk to an astronaut. And I played a part of it. That was some really cool highlights.
Yeah. So I would think everything you were doing is a one and done kind of thing, right? So I would think there'd be a huge amount of pressure to make sure nothing screwed up. So how did you deal with that pressure?
Oh man, it took a lot. I used to get so nauseous before every show. I'm saying like even like 4 years in on the job before every live show, and I did a ton of live shows. I would get nauseous beforehand. I would have to like, all right, it's 30 minutes before the show. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'm gonna give myself this pep talk because you got this, and that's what I would do. I would give myself a little mini pep talk in the bathroom. And I go back upstairs and it's like, all right, and it doesn't help that not only is the producer is doing a countdown for the open of the show, but Encompass, the folks who handle our satellite, they do a countdown as well. So I was like, guys, stop counting. You're making it worse. Just tell me when to roll. Stop. Like my heart is like pounding. And like at one point I remember I was getting ready to push up the fader for me to talk. Because I used to have to talk to tell the astronauts while we were live on TV and my audio's going up to the space station at the same time that the event was over with. And that used to be the most nerve-wracking part of the entire show. I don't care what other show it was. The fact that I had to talk on television and to astronauts in space freaked me out all the time. And like at one point my hand used to shake while I was on the fader getting ready to do it because I was so terrified. And then like it got to the point where I literally looked at my hand and I was like, stop it. And then my hand stopped shaking. I was like, okay, let's do this. Like I was yelling at my body to get yourself together.
So I don't understand how this works. So, and anybody who knows me knows I don't know anything about gear. I think it's how do you sync up astronauts that are out in the space station with people that you're? How does that work?
It's so interesting. Like when I actually like in my head now, the setup seems so simple. When I tell it out to other people, they're like, this is not a simple setup. I can't believe you did this every single day. But it was one of those things where it's like the astronauts have their own HD camera. They have a microphone that they use, a handheld microphone that's wireless, that's connected to the camera, and that's connected to an encoder, right? And we have a decoder here on the ground. So they send that signal down, and that's all coming together in sync. So that's great. But I need to somehow get their audio. We'll get the audio from the kids that are asking questions up to them. And so what I would then do was connect the Skype call, push their video from the encoder to the Skype call so the kids can see and hear them, and then push the audio from the kids up to the station by using like basically they call those voice loops, which is what the astronauts usually communicate on. It kind of sounds like a phone call, basically. It has low latency on it. And so I would send that audio to the astronauts so they can hear. But I had to make sure I do it mix minus because the astronauts are listening through a speaker and then have a rolling effect of echoes, and it just becomes a nightmare when you forget to do that. But I would had to do that every single time. Send their audio from the kids up to the space station, and then they would communicate with each other. And then I had to send my audio from not only to the space station but to the kids and out to NASA TV. And it was a lot. It got even worse when we were working with our international partners and you had to get interpreters involved as well. And that's when the setup gets nasty.
Now, was there a delay between the different?
Yeah, it was a slight delay. What made a delay is the fact that in order for the kids to see them, they were using that HD camera and really good quality camera. That's what causes the delay of it sending down from the encoder. But it's only like maybe 2 or 3 seconds, so it's pretty short. But it's not as quick as a phone call. So it was a little slight delay, which I had to tell our clients, like the kids or the media, like, hey, there's gonna be a slight delay, so don't immediately start talking because they're going to start talking. You guys are going to be talking over each other the entire time, especially with media clients, because the satellite adds on another 4 seconds of the 2-second delay.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So who was your favorite person to work with? Not astronauts, because I assume all the astronauts were great to work with, but that came in that you had to sync up with the astronauts, whether they were performing or chatting or whatever.
Oh, I've had some really, really good ones, but I think the funnest one was working with Will Smith. When together, NASA, Will Smith, and Nat Geo did the first ever Instagram live from space.
Oh, wow.
That entire thing was challenging, first of all, because folks from both sides, it seemed like, forgot that at that time Instagram live only worked on the phone, and astronauts do not have cell phones, so we had to get really creative on how we were going to do that. But what was really funny about that event is that they give us production numbers to call. Oh, well, we have a number, like we have the main interview line that I wanted to get. So in the interview line when Will's going to be asking the questions on, and then I needed like our producer number. So time cues that doesn't interrupt the interview line. So I had the producer line all set up, and I got ready to call the main interview line, and I'm expecting like a personal assistant or the producer themselves to answer that line as well.
Sure.
No, it's Will Smith. So I called the number, and he was like, "Hey, what's up? It's Will." And I was like, pause. It was just crickets. I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Hello," and I was like, "Oh, hey, sorry, wasn't expecting you to answer your phone." Like, I was just blunt, honestly. I was like, "I wasn't expecting you to answer this call." And he was like, "It's my phone." I was like, "Why would they give me your number? Like your real number? Why would they do that? That's a terrible idea." And that was after they had already gave me the password for Nat Geo's Instagram, and I had a meltdown behind that because I was like, "Don't give me your password to your Instagram. I'm going to screw up and post a picture of my dog thinking I'm posting it on my account." And so I was just like, this is a lot of trust you guys have in one person, and I think that's a bad idea. But it was a really, really fun event. Will Smith was great. He had on his own little astronaut uniform, and I got to watch his behind-the-scenes YouTube video that he did about this call. Like, he prepped for this call. He wanted to learn everything he could about space, and it was really, really fun. You could tell he was really into it.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm fascinated by the fact that, and I had never, ever really thought about this, that you have to record the rocket taking off.
Yeah. Yes.
So
we do that audio as well. Yeah.
So how do you figure out where to put the mics?
So that's luckily that me working at Johnson, that was not a part of my job. That was the folks at Kennedy Space Center who had to go out there and place those mics. And we placed those mics because they burn up afterwards. But yeah, that was their job. My job was to take their audio in and push it out to NASA TV as part of a joint show. We worked a lot with the multiple NASA centers. So when you see like those launch shows, it's usually not just Kennedy Space Center or not just NASA Johnson Space Center. It's usually the both of us working together because Kennedy is where they actually launch it, but NASA at Johnson Space Center is where mission control is. So we have to communicate and work together. And it's always fun setting up where it's like, not only is there one audio engineer mixing it, there's two. So the two audio engineers have to be on the same page. And we're on two different time zones. So we got to really sync this up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've done a bunch of events with different top name engineers, and it seemed like the people that come to listen to them, whether they're pitching a product or not, they want to know what failures they've had, because they want to be able to identify with this person, right? And they want to know how this engineer was able to not just completely melt down and not be able to move on to whatever the next thing is. So what was your biggest failure at NASA, and how did you overcome it and keep moving forward?
Oh, man. Well, one, I completely embarrassed myself one time on live TV by freezing right before I was supposed to give my final line, which is, it's not even that big of a line at the end of the show. It's just, station, this is Houston ACR, that concludes the event. Thank you. That's it. But for some reason, I just couldn't get those words out. And like, I froze, and then I forgot to pull down my mic. So all you hear is me knocking over the microphone. And it was a mess, and like I was so embarrassed, and then on top of that, the rest of the show I couldn't think. Like the rest of the day I had other shows, and it was a rumble effect because I was so focusing on that. The rest of my shows that day went terrible. I mean, everybody else probably forgot about it, but me, I was internalizing it, and I just it was just a this domino effect of terrible shows. I was late to pulling up mics, so people's words were getting cut off. Or I forgot to pull down this other fader, so now there's an echo going, and people are calling like, "Hey, why is there an echo?" And I was like, "I can't fix it if you want to talk. Like, I can't fix the problem if you're calling me to ask me about the problem. Let me fix it." And so it was a lot. It was just a bad day. But how I had to overcome that is that I had to realize that you're gonna have those days. Like the amount of live shows that I do, it's bound to happen. You know, there's some days where you're just having an off day. And you have to charge it. You have to take it head on. First, you have to take responsibility for the fact that, yeah, I screwed up. I don't know what happened. I don't have an explanation for what happened, but I screwed up. I'm going to try to work to figure out what happened because I embarrassed myself on national television. But, I had to one, own up to the fact that I made a mistake, and I continue to make a mistake. And I think that was worse than the original mistake. That happens. Stage fright happens to the best of us and happens to everyone. But the fact that I let it affect me the rest of the day is worse than the original mistake that I made. And that was my biggest lesson. It's like, okay, look, you're going to make mistakes, but you can't dwell on it and screw up other shows. And that's what I had to learn.
Yeah. A friend of mine told me once early on in my company life, he said, if you don't screw up, you're never going to learn anything.
Right.
And when I did screw up, I screwed up big and I learned a lot. And I didn't repeat that ever. And now exactly. I know that every time I put on an event, something's going to go wrong. And it doesn't necessarily need to be big, and it doesn't need to, not necessarily anybody else knows, but I know something's going to happen. So it's how you can deal with that when it happens and not completely lose it for the rest of the event. So, yeah.
Yeah, I usually give myself, if it's a 20-minute shows, I would give myself 3 mistakes. It's like, you got 3 times to screw up. And if you screw up less than those 3 times, it was a good show.
Yeah.
If you screw up more than those 3 times, you need to figure out what was going on that day. But I used to give myself three mistakes, and it's like 3 slight mistakes. Okay, that's fine. You can have those. People have those. You're not a robot. You're a human.
Right. So you had a quote that I thought was really interesting. You talked about how you've always said that science is a form of art. I think of science as being science, and I don't really like science. So how did those two things work together?
Well, because in my world, I was mixing a lot of science with what I considered an art. And I always say, when you're mixing live, you honestly are performing. You are performing as well as if it's someone talking, if someone's singing, you're mixing, you're performing. And the fact that I was mixing scientific stuff made that science turn into an art. Like, I had to be basically in the same sync as the person that was talking to know, okay, they're talking here, this next person's going to talk. Even if there's not a script or anything, I had to know that just off of social cues, off of being around them, you had to get to know your talent. And that's what made the science part be an art. And then on top of that, just the way that the scientists and the engineers at NASA, how they work and how they move, it honestly is like when they're building a rocket or when they're training as astronauts to be, it's almost like training, for a big show. If you're an artist, like, they have rehearsals, they have different simulations that they do. They have like sound check. They have the same thing. They have a flight check the day before. And so the similarities are all there. It's just that one's performing music, the other one's performing science in space. And so that blend of it and the way that they go about doing it, about something they're so passionate about is kind of an art form. It's really, really beautiful to see people who are doing something that they're so passionate about and seeing how intense that they get behind it, and you see that passion come through and that burst of happiness when they succeed or when they actually launch. The coolest thing ever was to see an astronaut who's never been to space before go to space and do their first interview. They're super excited, like their eyes are just wide, everything is awesome, they're doing flips, like you can tell that they have reached where they want it to go. And so that's what the beauty behind it was.
So how did you deal with the, I'm assuming, constant stress and pressure of what you were doing? How did you, because I talk a lot about work-life balance. How do you balance out all that stress?
Yeah, well, see, that's part of the reason why I had to let it go, is because it wasn't very easy to do that, especially because I'm the type of person where I'm 100% in all the time. And I never gave my body time to rest, because I would, on my own, like, even though I'm off from work, I'm still, okay, what's going on the team's email? What's going on the team's chat? I did not know how to detach myself away from it. Not only because of the fact that, one, it's my job and that I'm technically on call when I'm at home, but the other is because I'm really into that science stuff, right? So I was really into it, even though it was my job. Because I was so personally involved and attached to it, I never gave myself chances to break, and I burnt out. And so I was like, I gotta do something, because that is a lot of stress. Live television is crazy stressful. Not being able to make a mistake. And then on top of that, live television, working for the federal government at the same time with live television, it's just, whew, it was a lot.
So did you learn anything that you've been able to incorporate about that, the whole letting go, work-life balance? I mean, what do you do when you're not working now at your new job?
Yeah, so now we use Slack a lot. I turn my notifications off on Slack. When I'm done working, notifications are turned off, period. I'm not checking email, no notifications till the next day. I do something that's completely unrelated from mixing videos. I play Sims a lot. I love The Sims. I used to play a lot in high school. I just recently got back into it because it's so much fun. So that's what I do. I'll play video games. I play with my dog. I do other stuff that's not involved with audio or mixing or things like that to really get my mind away from it. On the weekends, well, not mix, but I produce music for different artists as for fun. I'm getting more into doing that now because I've found that creativity to get myself back into doing it. And so I like to dibble and dabble. I found my art book that I had when I was in high school, and I'm getting back into drawing again. I was like, okay, yeah, these are the things that I can do outside of work that won't make me, hey, I need to do something for work. I need to get right back to it. So yeah. I do that, and then I incorporate, while I'm working, I incorporate breaks in my work. I force myself, because for some reason, I don't know what happens when you get in that groove of like mixing something. You'll sit there and mix the entire day and not get up. I literally set an alarm on my phone. It's like, all right, Alex, hey, you've been mixing for 4 hours straight. Get up for at least 15 minutes and just go walk around, walk away from your computer, take those headphones off, let your ears rest for a little bit, come back. And so that's what I incorporate a lot, multiple breaks now. And my ears actually thank me for that.
Do you think that's an experience thing though? Because I can't imagine, a lot of kids that are graduating from school, they get their first job. They're going to want to be the 24/7, which I get on one level, but it can't be good for them.
Yeah, so it definitely had to come with experience. I mean, when I first started working at NASA, I was 22. I'm 28 now. My body is tired because I worked like that so crazy. Yeah. All those crazy hours, all those multiple weekends. I went years without taking a vacation, which is a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn that I got to preserve my body. And then on top of that, my ears are how I make my money. If I'm constantly abusing my ears for years straight by mixing so much and listening and hearing these sounds so much, and I never give them a chance to break, I'm not going to last long in this industry. I want to last. And so, I started doing a lot more self-care things, taking my breaks, letting my ears rest, disconnecting from audio for a little bit. So that way, when I come back, not only am I eager to come back, but my body is rested and I can give you my best work.
Right. Yeah. So what did you learn from your role at NASA that you've been able to take anywhere else? What kind of skills did you learn there?
I think for me, let's see, the best skill that I took from there would probably be dealing with a diverse group of people. I had to deal with so many different types of folks, from super, super smart engineers and astronauts to the parent who volunteered to hook up a Skype call, and they don't really know anything about technology, so I have to walk them through it. To like foreign world leaders, to in basketball players or NFL players, and having to learn how to talk with them. Being able to talk to different people about the same thing, but explain it in the way that each one of them would understand it, is something that I had to learn at NASA that definitely helps me now at my current job, working with different creators. And it also helps me just in life, because there's that many people out in the world. So being able to communicate effectively to those different types of people definitely helps.
Yeah. I've talked to people where they explain something to me and I don't understand it. So they think if they repeat the exact same thing to me 3 or 4 times that I will understand it. I still don't. So I think it's definitely a skill if you can change up your explanation to people and be able to adapt to what they're actually going to understand and be able to jive with. So yeah, that's a tough thing to learn.
Oh yeah.
So do you think that you would go back into the studio now and record music again?
I think, I have a friend who actually just moved here from Atlanta, and she is like trying her best to coerce me. She's like, "You want to come sit in on my session?" And I was like, "I don't know, I might." But yeah, I could see myself doing that now. I'm a lot more mature, especially in the field and things, and I've done the live stuff for a while. I could see myself going back to live too. And I would do it differently than how I did it, but I could definitely see myself getting back into the studio, but just not all in. Maybe for certain artists type of things or certain projects, I wouldn't mind doing it. Just to see if maybe now the more mature me, do I like it or do I still hate it? So,
so in all your goal setting, did you ever think you were going to win an Emmy?
Yeah, no, that's the funniest thing. I literally wrote down that I wanted to win a Grammy, and I wrote down I want to win an Oscar. I never said anything about an Emmy. And it's funny because I actually have my goals that I wrote down. I was like, wow, I never talked about an Emmy ever. I always talked about a Grammy. Obviously, working audio, I always talk about Grammy. And then when I got to Full Sail, I started looking at because I wanted to mix for movies and stuff. So I was like, oh, cool, I could win an Oscar for sound mixing. That's awesome. I never thought about an Emmy for TV. And so when I
and you have it right there.
Do
you want to show it on the screen?
Let's see if I can get a good glimpse of it.
There it is.
Yeah, she's just hanging out.
So what was that like? How'd you react when you won that?
It was so funny because I remember seeing a tweet, like a NASA tweet, saying that NASA was nominated for an Emmy for the SpaceX Demo 1 launch show. I was like, oh, that's so cool. NASA got nominated for an Emmy for a show that I worked on. That's awesome. Never clicked in. And then when the actual award ceremony happened, one of our, at the time, Dan, one of the commentators for that show, he actually went to the Emmys, and I follow him on Twitter. I was like, oh, look at Dan. He has such a cool suit. And then he takes a picture. I was like, we won. I was like, oh, that's so awesome. NASA won an Emmy. That's so cool. I just kept saying it. NASA won an Emmy, not I won an Emmy. And it wasn't until he came back and it was maybe the October time. He was like, hey, Alex, so what do you want on your certificate? I was like, oh, cool. I get a certificate from the Emmys? They're like, yeah, you get a certificate. So I was like, yeah, just put it down as audio engineer. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I just thought it's like, oh, you just get a certificate because you participated in it type of thing. But then the Emmy came in right before Christmas, and I was like, whoa, what do you mean? I get my own? I saw that we had a team one, but I get my own one, with my name. And they're like, yes, Alex, you won an Emmy. You literally were a part of the team. You did the audio for the show. I was like, yeah, but I didn't know we get our own. And that's when it settled in, and I freaked out.
So have you changed any of your award goals now that you have an Emmy? Are you still looking for that Grammy and the Oscar?
Well, yeah, now I really kind of want those, because I was like, I never expected the Emmy, but I really wanted those. Yeah, I think I always joke and tell my mom, I was like, hey, Mom, did you realize I'm only a quarter of a way from being an ego? I'm 1/4 in. I just need to get a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, and I feel like I can do those things. I didn't think I could get an Emmy, and I got that. I think a Grammy and an Oscar is pretty. I can do that. I'm pretty sure I can do it. The Tony thing, I'm gonna have to figure that out. I've never been that much. I don't know any folks in the theater industry. I was like, but I need to make some theater friends, and then I think I can make that one work. Because now, me winning an Emmy, I was just like, okay, well, now anything's possible, because I never saw that coming. I just don't want to sell myself short. I was like, why not? Let's just do it.
Yeah, I think it's great. You were talking earlier about having imposter syndrome when you first started there. So how did you get over it? And if you did, how did you get over it?
It got better over time. I wouldn't say that I completely got over it. It definitely got better. I wasn't afraid to talk in meetings after a while, which was nice. So there was that. And I stopped checking out in meetings. I would check out in meetings because I would be so busy, wow, that's a NASA astronaut sitting there. That's an engineer right there. That's the NASA center director, like she's sitting right there and they're all talking and I'm sitting here in this meeting with all, and then I completely missed what the meeting was about. So that got better over time. And then there was moments where I would feel like I would have imposter syndrome, and then I'll see an astronaut like forget to turn on their microphone, and I'm just like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. Or like, you know, they're like, hey, the microphone's not working. Alex, what do you suggest to troubleshoot? I was like, wow, you guys need me. Did you change the batteries? And it's usually a battery thing. They probably forgot to change the batteries. But I solved that problem that no one else could figure out without me being there. And so that helped the imposter syndrome go away.
Yeah.
At least for that short period of time.
So in your new job, why don't you talk a little bit about where you are now?
Yeah, so working at Standard and Nebula, working with different creators, like YouTubers and podcast creators and folks who do short film style. It is such a cool, different world because I'm so used to live. Everything has to be perfect on the first take type of thing, like, because you don't get a second take. And so to be able to calm down a little bit and have time to really be creative in my mixes and do sound design, that's something that I got to do more at NASA that I didn't get a chance to do because I was really hired to do live. So I didn't get to do a lot of audio post-production. They had some audio post-production work there, but it wasn't a lot. And so I rarely got to do it. But that was something, you know, that was on my goals. I want to do audio post-production. And so that's part of the reason why after I left NASA, my thought was, I want to go into doing audio post-production. I want to try that side of the world. I've done music a little bit. I've done live TV. So let's work on audio post-production. Let's just hit all the little tabs of audio world I can go to. And like, it is a lot of fun sitting here, like working on different YouTube videos and from YouTubers that I watch that, like, as a fan, I was a fan before I started working there. I'm working on their videos and like, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And so that's been a lot of fun. And then just getting to use my creativity more in the sound design and in my mixing style, figuring out that I have a mixing style when it comes to shows. I didn't know I had one of those, but yeah, it was really fun.
And are you dealing with a lot of different subjects, a lot of different people? So does it keep it always exciting and new and different?
Yeah, it does. It keeps it fresh. The content that I edit, so each YouTuber they have different content that they put out, and then there's multiple different YouTubers and other content creators that, you know, it may be something that's lighthearted and funny, or it could be true crime, or it could be I was like, oh, this is so cool. So it's like every day it's like, what am I working on today? Is it going to be super sad and sappy, or is this going to be a funny quick little YouTube video? Like, I don't know, but I'm excited to see, like, what am I working on next?
So what attracted you to this job?
The main thing that attracted me to this job was the fact that, one, it was remote. I don't have a commute anymore. I used to have a super long commute to NASA, like 60 miles there, 60 miles back, even though I lived in Houston and NASA is technically in Houston. So it still was 60 miles. So the not having to commute was great. The hours are a lot better. I'm not working all throughout the night. You know, I had a lot of early morning hours at NASA that were pretty terrible. Like, you know, some coming in at midnight or coming in at 3:00 in the morning for a 20-minute show. So I had to drive an hour for a 20-minute show. And it's like, oh God, now the rest of the day I'm going to be tired. So it's like, but now my schedule's a little bit more flexible, so I can do like other fun stuff that I wanted to do at home. I can do a little bit more creative stuff because it's something different, something exciting. And then just the opportunity to do another part of audio that I haven't done before professionally. Like I did it as a student in college, but never got to do it professionally before. That has been really exciting. It's a new challenge. I felt as though like NASA was completely challenging, don't get me wrong. And it still would probably be if I was still there. But this is a different challenge. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, shiny, different challenge. I like that. Let's go try that a little bit. Yeah.
So what's the next thing you want to do?
You know, I don't know. So I'm kind of softly getting into movie style. I still want to hit like work on a feature film type of thing. I still want to do that. I would love to be on set for that.
I know people.
Oh yeah. Oh. Put me in touch. I still want to probably like work on a game, like do some game audio, like sound design for a game. That
Uh-huh.
seems like something super cool and completely different than what I've ever done. And I still have my one bucket list thing I want to mix at the Grammys. I'm not hanging that up yet. Um, Even though that would be live, I don't mind live for a night. That's awesome. That'll be
Yeah.
great. And
Yeah.
it'll be a little way back into the music world a little bit too. So that's still on my bucket list. So things like that. And then possibly, I mean, in order for me to get to Tony, I got to work on some theater stuff. So I got to go into that world too. So
Yeah. It's
yeah,
a lot going on.
I'm going to keep busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So you helped create the Houston We Have a podcast. So, and you've been working with different people with podcasts. So everybody has a podcast now. Everyone. So what, as an audio engineer, if people are thinking, oh, I'm going to start a podcast because everybody's doing it, what gear do you think they need to be able to start one and do it well?
I'm so completely biased. I really think a great sounding microphone is the thing. It's the main thing, especially if you're not an audio engineer and can't mix that well. At least if you have a great sounding microphone, your mixing that you would have to do won't be as much as if you had a terrible microphone and you're having to salvage it.
Uh-huh.
I always tell people that I was like, microphone is key. Like, you gotta sound good. If I'm going to listen to you and not even like see you and just listen to like real podcasts, like not see you, just listen to you, you got to have something worth listening to. And it's not just the content. It has to sound good that I won't turn it off. And so a good microphone, I would say a good, recording software, some kind of way. It doesn't have to be super expensive. You don't have to get like in the weeds in it. Just find something that you're comfortable with. But if you have a great microphone, then, I mean, you're kind of like halfway there. And also content, you got to have something to talk about, something that people will want to listen to. And it's not so much that you got to cater to what someone wants to listen to, but find something that you're so passionate about in talking that you can have a whole conversation about that and it will keep people listening. Even if you're rambling, going on a tangent, I'm one of those people who don't mind if I'm listening to a podcast and someone is going on a tangent. I think that's hilarious. I think that's great because that's like, wow, they're really passionate about this subject.
Yeah.
And like, you get to freely be yourself. I'm not a big fan of like super scripted, things. Like I like to see the chemistry and hear the chemistry between the host and the talent that they have come on and the guests. But, just things like that, like have quality content that people want to listen to and have a great sounding microphone, and the other stuff will fall into play. And then you have to give yourself time to trial and error type of thing. You gotta the only way you can get better is if you record more. So you just gotta keep recording.
Yeah, I totally agree. So one of the things I talk about a lot, and it's important to me, is community. I love this pro audio community, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, is because I wanted everyone to see how cool these people are, and not just because they've won 23 Grammys or because they created a piece of gear you're using, but because they're just cool people. And the pro audio community became especially important during the whole pandemic because everybody was home. So how do you keep this community together? So you've been parts of lots of different communities. So NASA, school, so what is your definition of community?
I always say like, I like that you use the word community because I usually use the word, these are my kind of people. Mm-hmm. And what I mean about my kind of people is that I don't have to be anything other than myself around these folks. And then they get it. They get when I'm talking about how crazy my schedule is. Someone in that community gets it. They've been there, done that. They can relate. They can empathize with me on it. And that's what I need. And that's what I mean when I say my kind of people. It's like we can sit here, we can talk about different things that we've had going on of our different types of careers that we all had in audio. And we can relate and we can share stories with each other. And in those stories are lessons that I can use. And it's like, hey, they did that and that turned out terrible for them. Maybe I won't go that route. If that ever happens to me, I know not to do that. It's a lot of times it's not, this is what you should do. It's one of those, this is what you shouldn't do. So I have a list of things that I shouldn't do. And I might be, and by listening to every one of those, what you shouldn't do, you're a lot closer to knowing what you should do in situations that pop up. And so you only get those types of things when you find a good set of folks to be around and a good community. And like you said, the pro audio community is one of those things where it's just like, they get it. They get it. Like those little small things that you nerd out about, they completely nerding out with you. And it's always fun, especially when like your blood family doesn't understand it. Those folks, they get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. So let's say there's someone at school now listening to this podcast and they want to be you when they get out of school. So what tips do you have? What tips, what would you tell them to do to be able to do something like that?
Don't be afraid to fall and to fail. Like that's one. Like you can't go out here and be afraid to fail and you want to do something great. Everyone who's ever done something great has failed. So, and because that's the only way you can learn, right? And that's the only way you can be better. If you never fail, how can you be better than what you are? Right. And you should always grow as a person, just not even as a professional, just as a person. You should constantly be wanting to grow. And in order to grow, you got to know, you got to fail. You got to fall sometimes in order to grow. So don't be afraid to do that. As long as you don't make the same mistake twice, then, you're actually growing and you're learning.
Right.
Another thing is don't be afraid to go off your set path that you had, because I was such a stickler on this is my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan. It's okay if you stray off of that a little bit. I mean, that's where I learned some of my best experiences. I know how to hook up projectors now in gobos. I probably would have never learned that. And that is a neat little tool that I have in the back of my pocket that push comes to shove. I know how to do that. There's something there for me. And so each one of those little experiences where you're not exactly doing what you want to do, as long as you use that to spring you forward to doing something that you do want to do later on in life, it's never a lost opportunity. You didn't lose time because you had to pick a smaller job over your dream job. You're just adding more experience. So when you do get that dream job, you're going to be like 10 times better than the person that you were before you even got there.
Yeah. And I think every skill you learn at every different job, somehow you're able to incorporate bits of it in what you're doing. So it just makes you that much better. And you take that job you're at now and your next job, you take those parts too. So I think you just keep growing.
Right.
So, okay. Last question. This is the one, how I end all of it. Everybody I know is into food. I don't understand it. They're all foodies. So, and I don't make decisions if I'm not working. So I'm going to come visit you in Houston. So I want to know where we're going to go eat, what we're eating, what we're drinking. I usually ask, what kind of music are we listening to and what are we talking about?
All right. So you're coming to visit me in Houston. Well, you have to have really, really good Tex-Mex because we have the best. I mean, it's in the name. It's in Texas. So I always say our Mexican food is the best. So we're going to go to Papacitos, which is my absolute favorite.
Okay.
And we're going to get their giant margaritas that they have. What looks like
Perfect.
It looks like, honestly, like a fishbowl. And it is awesome. They actually limit you to 2 per person because of how strong and how big it is. But they're my favorite. We're going to get those. We're going to eat some chips and queso and some amazing tacos. And we're going to talk while we're listening to Spanish music, most likely. I think Papacito still does it. I know pre-pandemic on the weekends, they would have a live mariachi band there. And that was always the coolest thing. Like the best thing in the world. You have tacos, you have margaritas and a mariachi band. Like that's living life, right?
That is.
And so we're going to listen to some mariachi music and we're gonna talk about everything audio. Like I like to geek out over like microphones and gear sometimes, even though I don't know what I'm talking about, but I like to learn about it. Like, hey, or make like funny audio puns, like audio jokes. My family here, they don't get my sound jokes. I made an XLR joke the other day and it did not land well. My nephew totally didn't get it, but I feel like you would get it, so we can have that conversation.
Let's do that. And we can talk about how you're going to get a Tony.
Yeah, but we're going to have to figure that out. I got to know some theater people.
I actually know some.
Oh, awesome.
So, well, thank you so much for being part of this. It was fun. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.